So, hey guys. Now, today I would like to talk about what I feel is like one of the biggest trauma I've ever experienced in my life, which was right after I went in for surgery, just after I was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis. After the surgery, the time that I spent in the ICU. Now, at that time, like I said, I was just diagnosed with myasthenia gravis. Now, quick run through. Myasthenia gravis is a disease that weakens your muscles with use, right? So the more often you use a muscle, the worse it's gonna get. Now, if you are interested in how I was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis, please have a look here. Now today is about the time I was basically locked motionless but aware into my body after I came out of surgery to have my thymus and my thyroid removed. Now, additionally to the myasthenia, I have Graves' disease, right? They couldn't control my Graves' disease with medicine, and my thyroid had to be basically taken out, right? I mean, there's other options, but since I was going under the knife anyway, they chose to take it out together with the thymus gland. Now, the surgery took around 5 hours, I think, so it was a fairly long surgery anyway. I was terrified before I went in, as you would be. Additionally, you know, if your thyroid goes insane, you go insane. If your thyroid overproduces hormones, you basically go crazy. It causes psychosis, it causes manic depressive episodes, it will make you go insane. So I was a bit on edge, let's just say, when I went in for surgery. I'm smiling about it now because I've already written it down like 3 times by now for work for this video, which, you know, which means it shouldn't be this rambly, but I already spent a couple of hours crying about it, so I don't have to do this on camera now. So yeah, I came out of surgery. Now, the way they remove your thyroid is basically by cutting right here and taking out the gland. It is a butterfly shaped gland. It is the ugliest butterfly in the whole universe, if you ask me, and mine was basically already half destroyed by the Graves' disease antibodies, right? They attack the thyroid, which makes it go crazy. Now, the thymus, on the other hand, gets taken out by keyhole technique, as they call it, which basically they made a little hole right there with the brackets, and one right here, I think that's it, and another one a bit above it, which the drainage goes in. And then they go in with these instruments and take it out. Now, to do that, they have to collapse one lung. So they collapsed my left lung, which is why it took so long to go into surgery, because my neurologist decided I wasn't actually strong enough to partake in the surgery, because he was scared my breathing would falter too much. And let me just tell you, he was right. So I got a round of IVIG before going in, which gave me meningitis. Now, meningitis is really painful, but I'm not going to talk about it. I mean, I was considering jumping out of a window. So yeah, so I come out of surgery, they bring you into this little wake up room. It's just a room full of beds of people just waking up from surgery. So I was very dazed, right? I was very dazed, but I wasn't really in pain. I was just uncomfortable, you know, and scared as you would be when you come out of surgery. And I noticed I couldn't really move very well. Now, the myasthenia had led to that point that I couldn't move very well anyway, even before that. But just when I came out of surgery, I noticed I couldn't really lift my arms at all anymore. So I couldn't really reach the reach the button to call for a nurse or anything, and I couldn't speak because they had just sliced open my neck, right? That's one of the biggest risks when you go in for thyroid surgery, is that they damage your vocal cords and your the little thing on top of the vocal cords, that gets damaged, and your voice gets damaged permanently. I mean, it usually does get damaged a little bit in the process, but it'll recover in a couple of months. So anyway, it came out and I couldn't really speak and I couldn't really see because of the myasthenia. Again, myasthenia causes you to have dreadful double vision, right? So one of my eyes was just going out of the way. I'm gonna enter a photo right in here from more or less right after the surgery. I'm not sure how long that is after. I think maybe 5 to 6 days after. That's a photo. So imagine that times more. I looked much more terrible than that. Like, one of the eyes was just going up, so I couldn't see. I could hear though, and I felt very dazed from the anesthetic, obviously. So, and I couldn't really move. I noticed that I couldn't really move, but I thought, I just had major surgery. Most of my body got sliced up, it's like it's a pretty big cut. I mean, the scar wouldn't really, it doesn't show how big the cut is they do for the thyroid. And I had like drains coming out of the side of me, and there was drains coming out of this cut. I think it was 2 drains. I'm not quite sure. So I had a drain, and a catheter. That amazing. Best day ever. Anyway, ugh. So I was basically strapped to the bed. There's electrodes, I think they're called, stuck to your chest so they know if your heart is failing. I think I had one of those blood pressure things as well. I get dizzy. I was very dazed. So the blood pressure thing, obviously a needle in my arm. I forget what they call it. Infusion needle, IV needle, whatever. One of those things with fluids going in. So there was a lot going on. So I didn't really, I know I couldn't really move, but I thought it was because of the anesthetic, and I wasn't really up for moving anyway, right? Because I was very scared of ripping open my stitches. I mean, I hadn't seen it, but I was pretty sure it was terrible. So I was just lying there croaking about because I couldn't speak because of the vocal damage thing. So after a while, what felt like about 50 hours, but it wasn't, probably only half an hour or 2 hours or something. I don't know. It was I don't know. They took my bed and they moved me into the ICU. That is something if people with myasthenia go into surgery. They will usually reserve a room in the intensive care unit for you because you never know how people go through surgery, and it's just a thing where they take preliminary precaution. So they moved me into the ICU. I was lying there for a little bit. So I was there and they put up my back a little bit, and there was another guy in the room. In the ICU, there's partitions between you and the next person. I know there was a guy next to me and he was talking constantly. Like my voice was about, I'm gonna try and put it like this, right? I kind of talked like this, just with no height in it. Just kind of like a whisper with a little bit of tone to it. So you could only really hear me if it was really quiet in the room. But the ICU rooms are not very quiet, right? So there's a machine behind me that controls my pulse. That thing beeps. The guy next to me has something that beeps as well. The blood pressure thing does its thing every now and then, and there's usually people screaming somewhere. So ICUs are not a very quiet place to be in general. So I was in that room. Night came in. The nurses were giving me Messinone, I think, and that's the point where I realized there's another little issue, which is that I cannot swallow anymore. I realized my the muscles in my throat were getting too weak. Every time I swallowed something, it would immediately come back up, right? So myasthenia affects every muscle in your body that you can move voluntarily. Swallowing is part of those, right? Swallowing, the muscles in your throat are something you can move voluntarily, right? I can decide to swallow now. Not an issue, yay. So I couldn't understand it at that point though, that I was taking those little pills, those little methanol pills. They were single tenors, right? They were 10 milligrams. Now I just take one 60 milligram, but they were single 10 milligrams because they weren't too sure about the dosage yet, because I was just diagnosed, and you know, you have to try it out basically. So I had to take every 3 hours or 4 hours. I had to take six. Great. I had to take 6 little pills of methanol. I couldn't swallow them. I literally couldn't. I couldn't understand it. I didn't understand that that was the issue. That I just thought my throat was dry, and you know, all of that. Oh yeah, there was also, by the way, and before I forget, there was a mainline IV in my arm, which they can only do in the ICU because they use your main vein, you know, the one that if it gets cut, you bleed out. So that's the one they use for that IV. And that was gross, man. It goes in and out. I think I said it was scar from it. Ugh. It was time to go to bed, and the guy staying next to me in the room, I couldn't see because again I couldn't move. I could only hear him. Was an elderly man that just came out of major surgery, and like it happens with elderly people, if they go under anesthetic, and they've already had problems mentally, they usually don't come out of it very well. You know, they have trouble. The brain has trouble to go back. So it's like a dementia that sets in immediately after the surgery. So that poor guy thought he was stuck in a little prison, I think, because he kept calling for help. He kept calling for help and rumbling about and switching on and off the light and calling, and he didn't know where he was. And he was screaming and calling for help. And I mean, not any other situation, I would obviously have tried and talk him down. But again, I couldn't talk. I couldn't move. I couldn't see him. I couldn't reach anywhere. So I just, you know, the nurses came in every 10 minutes to check, because he had called the nurses again with the button, and he went, yeah, he basically his brain reset every 5 minutes. I felt very sorry for him. He was terrified. So anyway, the entire night he's screaming for help, and I kept feeling a little bit worse, right? So I couldn't sleep the entire night, and I was exhausted. I mean, not his fault that I couldn't sleep. You know, he was terrified. Terrible life. So I asked for earplugs, and someone brought them to me as well. But then I noticed I couldn't really put them in. It was a whole thing. But then at that point I was still so dazed. I didn't realize what that was. Right, my myasthenia had never been so bad that I couldn't move my entire body. And I tried to kind of pull myself up, and then I couldn't. And then again I thought, you know, it's just anesthetic. It'll wear off. It turns out that when my thyroid was taken out, when you take out the thyroid, it starts poisoning your body with the thyroid hormones, which, like I said before, lead to psychosis, a really fast heartbeat, heart arrhythmia, which is why I was strapped to the beeping stuff. Now, this poisoning with anxiety like crazy, right? So I was very scared the entire time, but that was mainly due to the thyroid poisoning, thyroid hormone poisoning, I think. But you know, this is all information I've gathered after, because in the moment, in that week I spent in the ICU, that I didn't have that information, at least not really. I only had my experience, and my experience was terrifying. So let's say at 4 a.m. approximately, there's a shift change, right? And the nurses change, and the nurse that is responsible finally decides that I shouldn't stay in the room anymore with the guy that kept screaming. So I got moved over there. I was super grateful. I finally tried to sleep. And then I woke up because I had to, I was feeling sick, right? I think I was kind of dozing around, sort of dazed. And then I woke up and I think I had to puke. I think I had to throw up. I felt very sick. And it was I'm not a throw upper, right? I very rarely throw up. Every time in my life I have thrown up, I've either had like the worst stomach bug in the world, which happened once, that I actually puked. Usually if I ever have to throw up, the vessels in my eyes break. Seriously, I cannot, my body's not designed to make that motion. I had to throw up. So what do you do when you throw up? So I was lying on my bed, strapped to the bed, right? And I, at that point, hadn't really realized what it was like to not move, because I hadn't tried to move a lot while lying there, because what's the point? So I suddenly had to do this movement, right, to throw up and not choke on my own puke, and I couldn't. I literally, my body was unable to, the whole entire muscles in my torso wouldn't do that. Even if I could lift my torso a little bit, the muscles in my neck were way too weak to bring my head with it, right? I literally couldn't. I couldn't do this movement anymore. Couldn't. I just lay there and I tried to puke, but apparently, yeah, it was coming up, so I started choking, I think. I started choking a little bit, and then I couldn't really breathe anymore at all. I felt like I couldn't breathe in the air, so maybe I just had a little bit of a panic attack. I wasn't sure. Anyway, the panic I had led to the monitors going crazy, obviously, because, my heart rate, which was already crazy, suddenly went out of its realm, or maybe they even had, I don't know what they all monitored back in the little booth down there, but someone came in and lifted me up so I could throw up, basically. They lifted me up, so when they lifted me up, my neck fell back, because like I said, I couldn't, no muscles left, nothing. Everything, like every movement I do now, and even sitting up straight without your head just rolling back, you take it for granted, but if it doesn't work, believe me, you'll notice. So that was going on. I puked and I was sitting there in my hospital gown, half naked, which does nothing for either your self-esteem nor your self-worth, and it does absolutely nothing for your self-respect, to be honest, right? So I'm basically naked. The back of me is naked. The front of me is sort of naked, because, the hospital grounds just kind of go like half it, and then there's pipes everywhere, and stop it, man. It was terrifying. So after I puked, turns out I couldn't get an air into my lungs anymore, right? I was just couldn't breathe. See, turns out that even your diaphragm, that's not it. The muscles you use for breathing are also voluntary muscles. Voluntary muscles are affected by MG. Now, an MG crisis occurs as soon as they have to intervene with your breathing, right? If your breathing is so weak that they have to intervene and either intubate or otherwise intervene, that's when you've reached crisis state. And that was the point. I reached crisis state. I had no muscles left, no muscle control whatsoever. I couldn't breathe anymore, and all of that turned out because apparently I had, when they collapsed the lungs are not really made for collapsing. They don't like it. So they kind of crumple it up and they take out what they have to take out, and then it gets blown back up. And in that process, there's a lot of mucus going into the lung. So my entire lungs were covered in mucus, and it was stuck everywhere. I couldn't cough, because, for coughing, you need muscle movement. And I couldn't, do all those things like, clear your throat. Couldn't, because for that you need muscle movement. And since neither my throat, nor my torso, nor my diaphragm, I'm just gonna call it that, had any movement. I've given up on my legs long ago, and even my arms and everything was just not working anymore. Nothing was functioning. It was delightful. So I'm crying at that point. I'm crying. I'm scared I'm gonna die. I was legitimately scared I'm gonna die. My heart goes crazy. I can't breathe. So the doctors bring in I think it was a CPAP machine. Now that was too late for a CPAP, right? They didn't realize that my lungs were filled with mucus. So the CPAP basically just assists your breathing, right? So if you breathe in, it gives you a little push, so you can breathe in. If you breathe out, it gives nothing happens. It's just, when you breathe in, it goes. I think that's what it does. Now that didn't work. That didn't work anymore because my lungs were filled with death, and I couldn't get rid of it. And the machine was just kind of moving the mucus like I couldn't breathe. It was awful. So when you are in the ICU and in a university hospital especially, most of the doctors that work there are assistant doctors, right? They're finished studying, but they still have their, they're basically Grey's Anatomy like young doctors. They don't know all the answers, and they don't have to because they're new. So if that happens to you in the ICU in the middle of the night, there is just like 3 very scared assistant doctors, not really sure what they're doing. They're not quite sure. No one could talk to me, so I couldn't even tell people what was wrong with me, right? So I noticed I couldn't breathe, but I had no muscle movement, and at that point, with all the mucus, my voice was gone. It disappeared. There was nothing to be had there. No noise coming out of me at all. It was just, dying. So one of the nurses finally realized what was going on, right? So the nurse noticed, and she tells the doctor that he tells the doctor that there's apparently something stuck in my lung. So they bring out this suction thing and go in through, I think they went through my nose to suck out all the stuff in my lungs. Now I'm awake for all of that. Right, I'm awake, I am wheezing, I wished I passed out at some stage, I didn't. Now to go through your nose and suck out all the stuff out of your lungs, you kind of have to lift your head up like that. Now I did not have that in me anymore, as we've established. No movement was in me left, no control was there, so someone lifted my head, which kind of ripped some of the stitches, obviously, and then they went in with the suction thing, which is very uncomfortable. Just letting that sit there. That is, So this is, it feels like what it looks like when people get liposuction, right? It looks very violent. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It looks very fucking violent, and that's what it feels like when someone pokes through your throat and lung with a suction thing. So they sucked out some of the stuff. Finally they can use the BPAP again, which kind of moves less mucus around by now, and I can sort of breathe and I can sort of calm down, and things get better. So I'm lying there absolutely panicking. I'm still horrendously feeling sick, like I have to puke. They lie me back, kind of pull me up on the bed, so I'm just kind of like lying there, not able to move or do anything. So yeah, at that point I can't move anything anymore. I can't move my arms, I can't move my head, I can't really see. I have extreme double vision. What I didn't have is ptosis, which is your eyes closing without you having it. That I didn't have. My eyes were still open, but one of my eyes was, quitting. So first night I'm kind of saved, right? I lie back down, and then that happened again. The whole thing. Just to think the entire beautiful story kind of happened again, except for this time I tried to call for help before it was time to die, right? So I had my little bell thing, and I pressed it a couple of times because I knew I had to puke again, and if I puked, the puke would move up and then kind of go halfway and then go back down the wrong pipe, and it would suffocate me. I knew that would happen. And also again couldn't, how your mind just kind of tries and not remember shit. Mine is very good at that. Anyway, I feel it happened more than once. Now I had to stay in the ICU for 5 or 6 days because my state wasn't getting any better, right? So eventually my breathing had normalized and I could just wear oxygen mask, and that was okay. Like after a couple of days I didn't need the assisted breathing thing anymore. Thank God. But through this thyroid hormone poisoning, my MG acted up like crazy, right? So I couldn't move at all anymore. I couldn't move up my bed. It was awful. I couldn't turn over, and if you lie on your back for the entire time, additionally to all the other pain I had, you start getting some other pains. So let's say I slipped down the bed and one of the nurses had to come in, and they have like one of them was very good at what she did. She was lovely, and they kind of pull you up and they put like a sheet under you and then they pull you up the bed. I'm not the lightest person in the world, as you might have seen. In the ICU, not being able to speak, see, move, or do anything really except for exist, being locked in my own thoughts the entire day, in my own panicking, absolutely hormone poisoned manic thoughts, was awful. I mean, awful. See, I am a person that does not like to think about things, right? I am a feelings killer. I murder my feelings. If I feel a feeling coming on, I douse it in kerosene and light it on fire. No feelings. I mean, now I have some feelings because I was forced for those 5 to 6 days to be stuck in my own head with absolutely no control what was happening around me, absolutely no way to communicate with people. I couldn't talk, I couldn't, the surgeons came in and they were talking to each other over my head, which is the most disconcerting feeling in the universe. That almost killed my soul, I'm telling you. That was the worst. I had questions, but every time I tried to speak, they literally, surgeons are awful people. No, not really. But I think they prefer not seeing patients as human beings because it makes their job of cutting them open and slicing up stuff easier for them. So I was trying to talk to them, asking them what happened in the surgery, and they looked at me, right? They're like, and then continued talking to each other as if I didn't exist, even though I was clearly trying to say something. There's like 5 of them. I hate surgeons. No, I mean this kind of things me, but they are not the nicest human beings on the planet. So that was terrible. Honestly, I actually think that is the worst part about it, right? That the fact that I was going insane from the hormone poisoning, and that I was stuck in my own thoughts and I couldn't communicate with anybody, and at least one of the nurses and all the surgeons that were there were treating me like meat, right? Like I'm not even there, because I couldn't do anything against it, right? That's the whole point. Like the doors of the ICU room are always open, right? And there's people walking past, and there's visitors going into other ICU rooms, and if someone goes to the bed next to you, they walk past you and they can look at you. So anytime they wanted anything from my body, they basically just undressed me right there in the bed and took whatever the fuck they wanted. There was no consent there, believe me. I mean, I would have probably had to give the consent eventually, but I wasn't fucking asked, right? I was lying there half naked, and they just strip shit off, and you're there butt naked with a catheter stuffed into you and pipes coming out of you everywhere. And they just take away your blankets and your hospital gown because that's time to do it now. No consent there. Seriously. And I mean, like I said, I would have given consent if someone had fucking asked me, but I would have asked for someone to close the door. Not really, you know. But no one gave a shit. Not true. Some people, you know, some of the better nurses, they obviously cared. They obviously cared, and they, you know, they would just like close the door. And there was one of the nurses who was just starting out. She was starting out as an ICU nurse, and God, I hope she didn't get the fucking job. She was the devil. I mean, no, I do not like that girl. You know, I just lie there. I'm basically, you know, my face will show you absolute terror the entire time, and she just does whatever the fuck she's no. The correct thing to do is to walk up to someone and go, even if they can't communicate. But I was obviously all there. I wasn't, you know, I was all there. I didn't have dementia or anything of that sort. The correct thing to do is, hey love, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to take the blanket and the thing, and we're gonna put the electrodes on you, and it'll only take a minute, and I'll close the door until we're done, okay? And I'll be like, done. I mean, I wouldn't like it, but, you know, at least someone had asked me. I actually think this is a separate video. I actually think this is gonna be a separate thing. So yeah, that's what I think was the worst part. It's being locked in my own body, being treated like meat by some of the staff, having absolutely no control over anything. Like, you know, at some point my bell to call the nurses fell down, and since I couldn't move to get it up, and he came in to check on someone else, and I tried to get his attention. I'm like, sorry. And eventually he's like, oh, you know, he luckily looked at me, which he probably, you know, would have walked past me otherwise. It was just pure luck because he couldn't hear me. And I'm like, the bell fell down. I mean, you probably can't hear it, and he couldn't hear it either. And he's like, oh yeah, the bell. And he almost walked out, and I'm like, no. And then he turned around, and he took the time, which I usually don't have and usually don't do, and came closer to me, and he's like, what, sorry, what are you saying? I'm like, the bell fell down. And then he said, oh, it fell down, okay. And then he picked it up and gave it back to me. But the whole process of that was very hard. And imagine, you know, I would have choked again on my own vomit. I would have been dead. Because I couldn't communicate that the bell fell down, and it's nobody's fault, it happens. And I couldn't reach for it. I couldn't touch you know, my arms were useless, everything was useless. I can only repeat it 5,000 times because it was so terrible. Now, finally, I would like to say that this is a very long video. If you stuck around until here, I was going to cut it shorter, and we're probably going to cut this short as well. But I think I just had to talk it out for a little bit. I wrote down main points I wanted to talk about, but I don't think I hit most of them, just because that would have been a 3-hour video and 5 therapy sessions. Let's just say, after being consciously locked into my own body, the experience has given me pretty bad PTSD. Which, you know, is quite normal. But anytime anything happens now that I don't have control over, no. That's not happening. No. If anyone decides anything over my head, we're not friends anymore. I'm sorry. That has traumatized me. No, that's not happening again. If I'm forced into the situation again by destiny, so be it. But besides that, nope. No. I'm gonna have control about shit. Nope. So let's just finally say, being locked consciously into a body that couldn't move, and losing the ability to communicate with my voice as well as my eyes, because, you know, myasthenia was extremely traumatic, and I haven't gotten over it at all. I think this is going to help me a little bit. And I feel for everybody that is ever put into this position ever. I know a lot of other people that have myasthenia that have gone into crisis and felt this, maybe not quite as dramatic, but felt this extreme powerlessness, and that is the main issue, I think, the extreme powerlessness of it all, that you have no control over anything. I know, it is terrible. Now, as you can see, I came out of it alive. Yeah, I said before, if you're interested in how I was diagnosed with myasthenia and what it is, please look at these videos. I'm going to put some here, and if you enjoyed this video and you enjoy this content in general, please consider subscribing there. Besides that, I'm going to try and calm down, and I hope you have a lovely day for now. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.